Hey, I'm Romilly from Golden Circle Designs, and today we're going to move on to stem stitch, which, just like it says, sounds really good for making stems. It's also called outline stitch. The difference is just on which side of the stitch you come up through, and you'll see that as you go. In general, don't worry about the names, just pick one side of the stitch and go for it. Sometimes some curves will be easier to do one way or the other. I'm also going to show you a faster way to secure the thread when you're just starting, because, well, frankly, I'm often too lazy to turn my work over, especially if I'm working on a big project and weave in ends. So we're going to start with a really quick little back stitch right here. Note this is right where you're starting. And I'm going to pull that end really close to the edge. And then this is a very small back stitch. And then since I'm going to go this way, I'm going to take one more going the other direction. Kind of like if I was left-handed. And that will actually hold really well, even through washing machine, if you've got threads that can be washed. So, for a stem stitch, we're going to take the first stitch, we're going to come out where that back stitch ended. And we're going to take a little bit, again, play with size because of stitches, because depending on the width, the thickness of your thread, depends on how you... So, you've got a loop, just a first straight stitch. The thicker the thread, the shorter the stitches generally, longer the stitches generally. Pull your thread one way or the other, it doesn't matter. Just if you're going to pull it down, always pull it down. If you're going to push it up, always push it up. Or if you're working vertically, to the right or left. And we're going to come back almost to the same spot on this one. This is just for the first stitch. It is a compensating stitch. So there's your first stitch. Your next one, from there you're going to take it out twice as far. Now we're going to make a little back stitch underneath the thread, the fabric rather, and come up right next to, in the same hole as the first part. So just beyond and up in the same hole. Just beyond, and I've slanted it already. Sometimes it can be easier if you draw a line. If your threads are all going to be covered up, drawing a line with the removable and their darker colors with the water-soluble marker or even a pencil can help. I don't recommend pencils generally, and I'm about to use one. But down ahead, that's twice your stitch, that's half your stitch length there, and you're going to come back up in that hole that you left, right where the other one came up. So, this direction is your stabbing direction for your right hand. If you are, I know that this is not the direction that I suggested. Stabbing works better moving right from left with the stem stitch. If you want to do the sewing method like you did with the back stitch, you're going to want to start on the other side, because this is my left hand and you get the sewing going down up. Again, we're pulling the loop down. Oops. And it comes up the same hole. Sewing can be quicker with the stem stitch. However, it's less accurate as far as coming up in the same hole. Just like it was with backstitch, it's generally less accurate. So down, pulling it away, and up. Down, pulling it away, and up. And I kind of settled into about 2 threads past that line. And up. Down, back up to the same hole, and up. Down, back up to the same hole, and up. Down, back up in the same hole, down, and that's stem stitch. If you do come up on different sides, because we're pulling the thread down, if we changed and pull the thread up, that's too far. You'll notice you get a little jog there. Now, let me do one more stitch with it pulled up. So with this way, you get a little jog in the thread, in the stitching. Let me come up and, because it's been okay, see right there, it's not a straight line anymore. You've got that extra line above. And that can be good if that's the look you're looking for, but to be a straight stitch, you'll want to stay keeping the stitches on one side of the thread or the other. And again, it doesn't really matter which side of the thread, just one or the other. I'm going to set this out of the way, and we'll switch over to the left hand. Okay, starting with left hand stitch for stem stitch. We're going to start with an easy way to get it started, get your stitches started, which is with a little back stitch. And we're going to go down through the front of the fabric, and I'm going to pull it through with my right hand. You can stitch this with your left if you're stitching in hand, holding the frame in the hand as well. Pull it almost all the way out. And then we're going to take a little tiny back stitch by bringing it up here. As I said earlier, I often will do this method of starting, and we're going to bring it back through with one back stitch, simply because I work on such large pieces often that I don't want to go back and flip the piece over repeatedly to weave things in. So there's your 2 little back stitches, and I'm going to stroke the fat thread on the back to pull that other piece through. And that's actually where we're going to start. So I'm going to pull my thread up, and we're going to cover those back stitches up with the start of the thread. I'm actually going to pierce that one because it's a little longer than I normally would. The key with running a good stem stitch is to keep all the loops on one side, whether you push them up or down, out of the way. And we're going to bring the first stitch is a compensating stitch, so you come up almost where you started the stitch. And then the next one is a little bit further on. And coming up where that stitch ended. Now with this thread, because it's a single row of stitching, the back stitches do show a little bit. I probably wouldn't use it if I was just doing a straight line, but if you're filling things in with multiple line, works fine. So down just a little bit further, and then we're going to come back up through that same hole where we put the last one down. And I cut a knot off somewhere, got in. So the next one, a little bit further off. and up. Now, as I said with the right hand, starting on, this is a knot, knots will happen. I'm going to smooth that out so that it's not a knot anymore. As I said on the other one, this is the direction you'll want to go if you're stabbing. If you're actually going to be using the sewing method, like the second version we did in the thing, this will be your right-handed direction, because you always want your dominant hand going towards your body when you're stitching. Otherwise, I'd be twisting it up and doing it this way. So, I showed the left-handed sewing method on the right-handed piece, which indicates that I didn't really think this through when I put this piece together. I will put links on for all of them. But down just a little bit up and up. Now, if you're really looking at this and how I'm doing it, you'll notice that I'm coming up in the same hole, which means that the back of the stitching will look like a back stitch, which is kind of cool. It's a very reversible stitch, as long as you make your tie-up, weaving in the ends, pretty clear. So just a little bit further. It's often easier to run this on with an actual drawn line. I'm going to switch to the right hand and demonstrate the sewing method. The stitches go the same way. You'll be just working from this side that way if you're going to sew with it. A little bit forward, coming up. Curves, you'll want to go around curves with shorter stitches. Note that it's sometimes a little more difficult to get a perfect back stitch on the back when you're using the sewing method. However, the sewing method does stitch faster. And the other thing I wanted to show you, we've been pulling the thread down. And now I'm switched hands, back to the left hand. If you were to switch in the middle and suddenly push your loop up instead of down, or to the right instead of left if you're working vertically, you're going to get a little jog in the stitching. So let me run a couple more on this to get a smooth line here. Oops. It's going to give me another jog. So here I'm coming up with my thread below the loop, which is the opposite of how I started. So let me show you what that does. If I'm up here, let's zoom in. We'll move this over. Oops. Up, over, down. Okay, so this is the spot where we just made a little bit of a, let's see, is that clear? Let's see if I can make this clearer. So, right here was where I jogged. You'll notice this stitch sits on top of the other two. So you've got one stitch that's just one straight stitch in there that's just kind of hanging out. That can be useful if you're changing direction. It can make a great roof eave roof pitch at the top. If you're going to go up and down, you can put a little cross piece. But in general, you want to keep your stitches either coming up from the bottom or coming up from the top. All one. Consistency is the key. And the tighter the curve, the smaller the stitches. Hope this helps. Have fun stitching.